Welcome, welcome. It is Thursday. Happy Thursday. We are on the cusp of a long holiday weekend, 4th of July tomorrow. So, of course, we always focus on the Atlantic hurricane season. That, at times, 4th of July has been a little active with named storms. Most recently, I think 2014, when we had Hurricane Arthur, the first named storm of the season, which actually was a hurricane, Cat 2, that made landfall in the Outer Banks. Thankfully, no named storms out there at this time, but that could change in the next couple of days. So tonight on HHL, we're talking about growing development odds off the southeast coast of the United States. And that area is typically favored this time of the year as we head into July, early on in the season, for what we call close in development, meaning it's right off the coast, right close by, that we could see some tropical development there. But all in all, I'm not too worried about it. All right, a look at the hurricane season overall, usually climatology. Here we are. The season kicked off on June the 1st, goes all the way to November 30th. And in July, by mid-July, we see a slight uptick in activity. Of course, it's nowhere close to what it looks like as we head into August, and certainly by September as we near the peak of the season right around September the 10th. So ways to go here, but we are already through 2 named storms, and we could be seeing our 3rd here in the next couple of days. So what are areas that we look for that are more favored for development in the month of July? Of course, the Gulf of Mexico is pretty much always open for business. It's the earliest to open, latest to close here. So we look there. We also look at the Western Caribbean. Some tropical waves could make it across the Caribbean, start to develop here, and then work their way into the favorable environment of the Gulf of Mexico this time of the year. Also, the Southwest Atlantic. This is the same area that we're watching currently. You got the Gulf Stream active, bringing and transporting water, warm water, from the Bahamas and the Caribbean northward. So that helps to enhance possibility of some marginal conducive development in those areas, the environmental conditions. And then later in the month, we start to see the first opening signs of the main development region, which usually gives birth to our long track major systems, our most intense storms. We usually focus on coming out of this area from the African easterly waves that seed that part of the Atlantic for development. So we'll see how the rest of the month goes. Out there right now, not much at all. It's a barren wasteland currently, thanks to, in part, or big part, is the Saharan dust. Take a look at this tropical wave here that at the first couple frames looks quite healthy as it's heading towards the southern Leeward Islands. And then notice the dust moves on in and it chokes that entire wave right off, and it's nothing more than a few cumulus clouds left over after that. So that's what it does to tropical waves. We've got a few more coming off the coast of Africa right now, but notice this large plume of Saharan dust. It is a little bit farther to the north, so this may squeak by to the south, but overall, things are quiet, at least in the main development region. I did mention this area off the southeast coastline. This is what we'll focus on going forward over the next couple of days. And since we spoke yesterday, development odds have gone up a little bit, especially in the short term. Yesterday, when we talked, that possibility was 0%. Now it's up to 40% within the next 48 hours and at 60% within the next 7 days. Right now, it's a disorganized area of disturbed weather, pretty much. And honestly, if it gets a name or not, the impacts will be the same. If it gets a name, we could just call it rain with a name, because that's predominantly what it's going to bring to mainly coastal areas off the southeast and up into the mid-Atlantic potentially. If it does throw that moisture far enough to the south, yeah, there could be some swells and some rip current risks. Certainly, and it being a big beach weekend, the 4th of July weekend, that would also be a concern here. But it having a name, not a big deal. It'll likely be a weak system if it even gets a name. We may just have a tropical depression that, of course, doesn't get a name and has to intensify to become a tropical storm, 39-mile-per-hour winds or greater, to get a name, and it may not even do that despite the odds here at 40 and 60%. Now, Hurricane Center did note that the hurricane hunters are set to investigate this area tomorrow if necessary. That being said, if we start to see it organizing over the next 12 to 18 hours, they'll likely go ahead with that planned mission. If not, they'll scrub it and maybe wait later into the weekend to see if we get some organization there. But overall, it looks to stay offshore for the most part, just throwing some rain in the general direction off to the north into the Carolinas. Right now, you can just see how disorganized this is. Very large area of squalls right now. Very not a nice start to the holiday weekend down through Florida. Pretty much rain showers all across the board there, all beach areas. The exception being down towards Miami and the Keys that are a little bit quieter, but nonetheless, not the best start. So we talked about this yesterday. We're looking at the European model and relative vorticity here, and that's basically the spin in the atmosphere. So right now, we don't really have anything organizing off the southeast coast. But notice what happens as we get into tomorrow. We start to see energy begin to consolidate here and become a little bit more circular. That's an indication of some growing organization. Now, when we start to see it get a little bit more stretched out, like it looks to do by the time we head into the weekend and move inland, that's a sign of weakening. All right, likely going to be some large-scale squalls and rain showers with this, maybe some thunderstorms. But in terms of a bona fide tropical system, low likelihood of that occurring. We're looking at some squalls coming on into the Carolinas and maybe lifting on into eastern North Carolina and maybe even Virginia. Now, also the possibilities there that we don't see it become a tropical storm, but it may be a subtropical storm or a subtropical depression. What's the difference between the two? Well, a subtropical storm has the maximum winds located far from the center. Of course, with a tropical system, a hurricane, we see that peak wind speeds getting closer to the center. That's a big difference from a subtropical storm. Also, on satellite imagery presentation, they're very asymmetrical, okay, very unorganized. You get a very symmetrical system with a tropical storm, especially a strengthening one, and then, of course, a hurricane as well. It has that defined textbook look to a hurricane or a tropical storm. Not so much with a subtropical storm, a little bit more disheveled. And energy from a subtropical storm does clash with the warm and cold air, and sometimes it's frontal-driven. Fueled by heat from warm ocean waters is the main energy source here. Well, it's the only energy source really for tropical storms and hurricanes. So big differences there. Just to kind of get through the definitions there in case we do see a subtropical depression rather than a tropical depression or tropical storms. But regardless, again, semantics there, but there will be impacts from this coastal low, we'll call it right now, since it hasn't developed yet. Up and down the Georgia coast, South Carolina, North Carolina, up into the Virginia coastline, including all the Outer Banks through North Carolina. Looking at the possibility here of some large swells, strong rip currents, of course. A lot of people out at the beach, be aware of that and pay attention to the flags that are posted at lifeguard stands. And beach overwash could be a problem. I really hone in on NC12 here because when we get some large swells, it almost always has some beach overwash. So keep that in mind if your plans to take you to the beach this holiday weekend. In terms of rainfall, it's really going to be right up against the coast through South Carolina and Georgia. Once you get into eastern North Carolina, pretty much I-95 and points east of there, it looks to be some of that moisture spreading a little bit farther inland, and that could stretch up into southeastern Virginia. So this would be into late weekend and early next week, the potential growing for some rain, unfortunately, up in our area here in Hampton Roads. Now, if it does get a name, it would be the third name on our list, and that would be Chantal. Third name on the list is coming at us about a month early in terms of climatology. Typically, we get our third name storm on or about August the 3rd. Say we get Chantal in the next couple of days, we'd be pushing around a month early and ahead of schedule there. For comparison, last year with Chris, that developed on June the 30th, so it was even earlier for the third name storm in 2024. And then, of course, we get the August the 15th, the fourth name usually, and then August 22nd, we get the fifth. All right, out in the eastern Pacific now, we were talking about Flossie. It became a major hurricane, second of the season, Cat 3, and now it is post-tropical. It is rapidly deteriorated, pretty much. And on satellite imagery, you can barely tell it's even there. In fact, the next couple advisories will be it, because it's building into colder ocean waters. And of course, once we get away from the warmer waters, the fuel source, we see it puttering on out like an engine starving for some gasoline. Not going to see this being an impactful situation anymore. In fact, it really wasn't for most of its lifetime. It stayed offshore, thankfully. Couldn't say the same for Eric, which was about 2 weeks ago, that made landfall as a major hurricane near Acapulco, as it made landfall 10, 12 days ago now. But right behind it remains very active in the eastern Pacific. We've got a cluster here. Right now it doesn't look like much, but as it builds into the same general area where Eric and Flossie developed, could get another named storm here, and this would be Gil. Odds have increased also for this, 40% chance in the short term, and 80% chance, highly likely, that we see Gil develop here within the next 7 days. Here's the list of the 2025 Eastern Pacific storm names. Up next would be Gil, and Flossie capped out at a Cat 3. Eric was a Cat 4. We'll see what Gil may do here in the long range. All right, that's the latest here, folks. I hope you enjoy your 4th of July holiday weekend. In the meantime, if anything does develop, check me out on social media. I'll be posting about the potential of Chantal over the coming days on Facebook, Instagram, X, and on TikTok. Have a safe and joyous holiday weekend.